Anyway, I was listening to True News from yesterday, and they're doing a great show over there at the FinTech conference in Singapore, and talking about the mark of the beast. So we might talk about that a little bit more. Also, Rick Wiles and Chuck Baldwin got together, and I think I'm done with Chuck Baldwin because of something he did on one of his last sermons, and I have that, so I want to talk about that for a few minutes. So let me just bring it up. Chuck Baldwin did on November 10th, so this is very recent. He did a sermon. The message is called "The Times of the Great Falling Away," and of course, this is a reference to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and the falling away and the revealing of the man of sin. And only he put the falling away, and he ties it to Zionism and the rise of dispensational futurism. He's saying that dispensational futurism and Zionism is the great falling away. And, that's not bad. I mean, it's closer to the truth, maybe. It's a better speculation than the one they're waiting for, the dispensational futurists. So at least he is putting away dispensational futurism, just like Rick Wiles, I guess. Yeah, maybe. Rick Wiles has gone total amillennial. But Chuck Baldwin did something very disappointing. He actually misused references. And how he misused his references is, so you can see this for yourself. If you go to his Liberty Fellowship MT channel there on YouTube, you can watch the Times of the Great Falling Away message. And you get about 12 minutes in, and he starts talking about the Antichrist. And of course, he goes to 1 John, where it's written, little children, and there are many antichrists. And so he wants to stick with that definition of antichrist. So there are many antichrists. But he uses Albert Barnes' commentary. And before he uses Albert Barnes' commentary, he goes into a spiel, and he says that I don't read nothing that's not 100, 150 years old. He says all the books I read are going back to the early Reformation up to 100 or 150 years ago, because it's just not worthwhile to read anything that was written after that. Totally useless, something like that. You'll hear the spiel. And what he's saying is basically the Holy Spirit can't work through anybody today, so there's no truth unless you go back 150 years. I've studied prophecy from the entire last 2,000 years. I've got a book here called The History of Apocalyptic Interpretation. It goes through all the apocalyptic interpretations that have been given by the most prominent writers over the last 2,000 years. And just because something is old doesn't mean it's good. There's a lot of bad stuff out there that was written over 2,000 years. Just as there's a lot of bad stuff, I'd say proportionally, anything that's good has always been the minority. Anything that is Holy Spirit, Bible, revelation, in line with the text of the Bible is not the norm, but it's the exception. Until you get to about the Reformation. Of course, you had a lot of bad stuff then, but the Reformation fathers agreed on some things. So he thought, going back to the Reformation, all right, well, this ought to be good. He did say Albert Barnes, and I know Albert Barnes is a historicist. So he goes through the spiel, first John, and then he goes to the man of sin. And he reads the prophecy in context, the man of sin sitting in the temple of God, showing that he's God. And then he reads Albert Barnes. He reads a portion of Albert Barnes' commentary. And then he quits, and he goes back to 1 John. And he uses it to back up his thesis that there is no specific identifiable Antichrist or line of men, because the part he reads in Albert Barnes talks about, kings being a lineage in the papacy, or not the papacy, but the man of sin can be referred to as a line of men, okay, such as a line of kings or anyone who takes a certain position that is replaced by somebody else when their time or when death occurs, something like that. But then he stops there and he jumps over to hold out his message that there is no specific identifiable Antichrist. And he goes back to, there are many Antichrists. So I thought, well, that's peculiar. I know Albert Barnes was a historicist. So I go to where he reads it. I find the exact quote he uses on my eSword. I still have it loaded here on the page, 2 Thessalonians. And if I open up my commentary to Albert Barnes, man of sin. So that's 2 Thessalonians. And so I'll open up the commentary there. And so you can read that for yourself. You got your Albert Barnes commentary open, and where he quotes Albert Barnes. But see, if you read everything Albert Barnes, he just takes that one small place and he doesn't even mention it. See, because I would mention that. I wouldn't skip over that, but he ignores it. I know he had to have read it, but before and after the quote that he pulls out, and I say abuses, because Albert Barnes definitely, undeniably, unequivocally names the papacy as the seat of the man of sin. And there is no getting around it. But for some reason, and that's what I find really disappointing, that he wouldn't even mention. He would use Albert Barnes, and the way a lot of people that misuse quotes or take things out of context to use for their own purpose. He doesn't use the purpose that Albert Barnes stated the things that he quotes for, but he uses them for a different purpose. He just uses Albert Barnes, written 150 or more years ago, to back up his thesis, but not to go to the point that Albert Barnes brought that up for. So I found that very disappointing. And the Jew hating and the Trump bashing is really wearing on me, man. I don't like Trump any more than I like any of the other presidents. Well, I have to say, I like him better than I like Obama. I like him better than I liked Bush. I guess I do like him better than I've liked any president probably since Ronald Reagan. Okay? And I liked Ronald Reagan because he was going to get rid of the Department of Education. And he outed the IRS as not collecting, using 1 penny of the income tax for going towards government services. It was all to pay the interest on the debt. And of course, we know that's a Federal Reserve is a Vatican banker operation, okay, in America. We had a Federal Reserve coup of the U.S. Treasury. Of course, the Federal Reserve is not federal. It has no reserves. It's not U.S. government. It's none of those things. It's a foreign banking cabal controlled by the Antichrist and his shadow government. So for some reason, so I'm done. So I'm looking for something on Sunday to replace Chuck Baldwin. I am going to write Chuck Baldwin a letter, though. I have contacted him in the past. I've sent him some of my books. He was very cordial and, about, in his communications with me. And so I had hope, especially so I'm hoping that he'll keep reading those Reformation fathers, but I'm going to write him a long letter and ask him why he refuses to identify the Antichrist as the Reformers have done. And I'm going to call him out on this. So pray for me or with me about that God will help me to reach this man with the truth and about being Protestant. Because if he's not going to protest, then I don't want anything to do with him. If he doesn't want to be a true Protestant, if he's only going to use historicist quotes or misuse them, then I'm done, man. That's all there is to it.